started with a simple, misplaced item. Laura was sure she had left her keys on the kitchen counter, but she found them on her bedside table. She dismissed it as forgetfulness. Then, her favorite mug, which she always kept in the same spot, appeared in the living room. These incidents were small but enough to make her uneasy. One day, Laura came home to find a note on her fridge. "Nice dress today." She hadn't told anyone about her outfit. Panic set in. She checked her apartment for signs of forced entry, but found none. The locks were intact, and the windows were secure. The sense of being watched grew stronger. More notes started appearing, always commenting on things that only someone close by could know. "You have a lovely smile," or "Enjoy your run this morning." Laura felt trapped and paranoid. She installed security cameras in her apartment, hoping to catch the intruder. Days turned into weeks, and the notes kept coming. Laura was on edge, constantly looking over her shoulder. One evening, while reviewing the security footage, she noticed something chilling. In one clip, a shadow moved in her living room, just out of camera range. It was as if someone knew exactly where the cameras were placed. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Laura asked her friend Sarah for help. Sarah suggested they set up more hidden cameras in places even Laura wouldn't think to check regularly. They also decided to stay up and monitor the apartment together. Their plan worked. Late one night, they heard a faint click from the front door. Laura and Sarah watched in horror as a figure dressed in black quietly entered the apartment. It was the building's maintenance man, someone Laura had seen many times but never thought twice about. Sarah called the police while Laura confronted him. The man was startled but didn't flee. Instead, he seemed almost relieved to be caught. The police arrived quickly and arrested him. They discovered he had been sneaking into Laura's apartment for months using a master key. He had a disturbing collection of Laura's belongings, notes, and photos in his own apartment. Despite the arrest, Laura couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She became more paranoid, even with the perpetrator in custody. One night, her apartment was found in disarray, furniture overturned, and signs of a struggle evident. Bloodstains marked the floor, leading to a chilling realization. Laura had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the violent remnants of a life invaded by mind games. Lisa was a diligent night shift nurse at the local hospital. She lived alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of town, her life a blend of quiet days and bustling nights. The routine was exhausting, but familiar, until the phantom calls began. One night, after a particularly grueling shift, Lisa was jolted awake by her phone ringing. The clock read 3 a.m. Groggy and irritated, she answered, but was met with nothing but silence. She hung up, assuming it was a wrong number, and went back to sleep. The calls continued, always at 3 a.m., always silent. Then, one night, the silence was broken by a faint, distorted whisper. "Can you see me?" Startled, Lisa scanned her dark bedroom, her heart pounding. She hung up and tried to shake off the eerie feeling, but sleep wouldn't come. Days turned into weeks and the calls grew more frequent, the whispers more disturbing. "I'm watching you. Don't turn around, and I know where you are," became nightly taunts. Lisa felt a growing sense of dread that followed her everywhere. Determined to stop the harassment, Lisa changed her number and installed a security system. For a brief period, the calls stopped and she began to feel a semblance of normalcy return. But one night, the phone rang again. The same distorted whisper greeted her, "You can't hide from me." Lisa's anxiety turned to fear. She confided in her friend Mark, a tech expert who offered to help trace the calls. Together, they set up a system to monitor her phone and record the calls. The next time the phone rang, they were ready. The whisper was clear. "I see you in your blue pajamas." Mark's face went pale. "This isn't random," he said. "Whoever this is, they're close." That night, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She checked her windows and doors repeatedly. Then, her phone buzzed with a new message. A photo of her standing in her living room, taken from outside her window. She screamed and called the police, but they found no one. Lisa decided to leave town for a few days, hoping to escape the terror. She stayed at a friend's house in a neighboring city, feeling a fleeting sense of safety. But on the second night, her phone rang again at 3 a.m. She hesitated, then answered. The whisper was different this time, more sinister. "You shouldn't have left." Terrified, Lisa returned home, only to find her apartment in disarray. Furniture was overturned and her personal items were scattered. On her bed was a single rose with a note, "Welcome back." Desperate, Lisa contacted a private investigator, Sarah, who specialized in stalking cases. Sarah discovered that the calls were being routed through multiple locations, making them nearly impossible to trace. However, she found a pattern. The calls always originated from areas close to where Lisa worked or lived. One night, while reviewing the security footage with Sarah, Lisa spotted a figure lurking outside her window. The face was partially obscured, but there was something familiar about it. Sarah enhanced the footage, and they both gasped. It was one of the doctors from the hospital, Dr. Stevens, someone Lisa had worked with closely. The police were called immediately. They searched Dr. Stevens' home and found a hidden room filled with photos of Lisa, her schedule, and recordings of their calls. He had become obsessed with her, using his medical expertise to manipulate her phone and stay undetected. Dr. Stevens was arrested, and Lisa's nightmares seemed to end. But the experience left her deeply scarred. She moved to a new city, started a new job, and changed her name, trying to rebuild her life. Yet, every night at 3 a.m., Lisa wakes up in a cold sweat, haunted by the memory of those phantom calls, forever looking over her shoulder, fearing the return of the voice in the dark. In the remote village of Black Hollow, nestled deep within the forest, the legend of the blood moon had been whispered for generations. It was said that every century, when the moon turned crimson, the curse would awaken, and the forest would demand a blood sacrifice. Most villagers dismissed it as a fairy tale, but this year, the blood moon was set to rise again. Jack, an adventurous teenager, scoffed at the old tales. He gathered his friends, Sarah, Mike, and Emma, for a night of fun under the eerie red glow. They ventured into the heart of the forest, armed with flashlights and bravado, determined to prove the legend wrong. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, and the forest seemed to hum with anticipation. As they reached the ancient clearing where the rituals were said to have taken place, the moon began to rise, casting an unsettling red light across the landscape. The friends laughed nervously, sharing ghost stories to lighten the mood. But their laughter quickly faded when they stumbled upon an old stone altar, stained dark with the blood of past sacrifices. Emma shivered. "This place gives me the creeps. Maybe we should head back." Jack smirked. "Scared of a little moonlight, Emma? It's just a story." But as the words left his mouth, the ground beneath the altar trembled. The air grew colder, and an ominous silence fell over the forest. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. They turned to see Sarah, her eyes wide with terror, pointing at the edge of the clearing. There, emerging from the shadows, were figures draped in tattered, blood-soaked robes. Their faces were hidden, but their eyes glowed with a malevolent red light, reflecting the blood moon above. The friends backed away in horror as the figures moved closer, their footsteps silent on the forest floor. Mike shouted, "Run!" and they bolted through the trees, the robed figures in relentless pursuit. The forest twisted and turned, disorienting them, the branches clawing at their skin like skeletal fingers. The friends became separated in the chaos, each running for their lives. Jack found himself alone, panting and bleeding from scratches. He hid behind a fallen tree, trying to catch his breath. The forest was silent again, save for the pounding of his heart. Suddenly, a cold hand clamped over his mouth and he was dragged backward. He struggled, but the grip was ironclad. He was hauled back to the clearing, thrown onto the stone altar. The robed figures surrounded him, chanting in an ancient, guttural language. Jack's screams echoed through the night as they produced a jagged, blood-stained dagger. The ritual had begun. Elsewhere, Emma stumbled upon Sarah and Mike, who had also been captured. They were bound to trees, forced to watch as the ritual unfolded. The robed figures carved symbols into Jack's flesh, the blood flowing freely onto the altar. The ground trembled once more, and a dark, sinister energy rose from the earth. As the ritual reached its peak, the moon's crimson light intensified, bathing the clearing in a ghastly glow. The robed figures stepped back, and from the shadows emerged the true horror. A monstrous entity, a grotesque fusion of man and beast, rose from the altar, its eyes burning with an unholy fire. The creature let out a deafening roar, and the forest seemed to come alive with the screams of the damned. The robed figures bowed in reverence as the creature turned its gaze to the remaining friends. Sarah and Mike struggled against their bonds, while Emma, filled with a desperate courage, managed to free herself. She grabbed a burning torch from one of the fallen figures and charged at the creature, hoping to buy her friends some time. The beast swiped at her with razor-sharp claws, tearing through her flesh, but she plunged the torch into its eye. It howled in pain, thrashing wildly. Using the distraction, Sarah and Mike freed themselves and joined Emma. Together, they fought desperately, the forest around them a blur of blood and chaos. Finally, with a final, anguished scream, the creature collapsed, its body disintegrating into ash as the blood moon began to wane. The robed figures vanished into the darkness, their chants fading with the moonlight. The friends, battered and bloodied, staggered out of the forest as dawn broke. They had survived the night, but the horrors of the blood moon would haunt them forever. Subscribe for more and leave a like if you made it this far. Thank you for your support.